I am recording me sending a crime tip to the FBI Tips and Public Leads webpage. This is the FBI's website here. Now, I have already reported these crimes hundreds of times to the FBI. Hundreds of times. Back in 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, I was constantly reporting these crimes to the FBI's tip website. And all my complaints were ignored. Never got a response from the FBI. They ignore everything I send them, every tip I send them, every link to evidence I send them. They ignore. They flat out ignore. Now, I have contacted this FBI via their Tips and Public Leads webpage hundreds of times. Now, I never had a software program that enables me to record me sending them a tip before until recently. So I am resending some of my tips that I have sent them with links to evidence backing up everything about my complaints. And everything I say is a complaint. Everything I say is a formal, official complaint. I am charging multiple people in organized crime under the pretense of committing sting operations. They were committing crimes, and they were poisoning people, and they were framing people, and they were gang stalking people. They were surrounding their targets with their operatives so that they can control the surrounding area around their targets, and they were committing crimes and staging crimes and setting up their target to get the blame. And they were doing this to multiple people at the same time. They were targeting multiple people at the same time, and each one of their targets they surround. They use their police powers to evict neighbors away from their targets, and then law enforcement takes over those apartments in order to surround their target, so that they can have full control of the surrounding area for their operations. Now, their operations isn't where they sit back and place video surveillance cameras and then you just sit back and wait for their target to commit a crime. No, that's not what they do at all. They do quite the opposite. Oh, they place cameras all right, but they take full control of the surrounding area around their target, but they're committing crimes. And they're using officers as doubles that will dress up like their target. They'll even put doubles of their target on their target's property. And they stage crimes. They literally, oh God, how do you explain it? It's like witnessing a police sting operation. It's kind of like witnessing a director of a movie directing all the actors and actresses for a scene in a movie. That's kind of what witnessing a sting operation is like. It's very similar because you have the law enforcement officers, which are the directors, and you have their subordinates that are essentially relatives of people in law enforcement, friends of people in law enforcement, even girlfriends of people in law enforcement, that are taking orders from law enforcement and stage these various scenarios and various events for law enforcement's video surveillance. And they're coached and directed by law enforcement as to how to do this shit. And I became a target of a sting operation, as well as my parents. And this sting operation recruited my wife and everybody on her side of the family into this sting operation. And right away, law enforcement was taking charge, just like a director of a movie. It's very similar to how a director and producers make a movie. They plan everything out, and then they get all their they hire all their actors and all their actresses, and then they have all the behind the scenes people that do the labor work and all that kind of shit. Well, that's sort of what a sting operation is. It's very, very fucking similar to that. It's extremely similar to that. And right away, when law enforcement makes a decision, they're going to set somebody up. When they make the decision, they're going to frame somebody. They recruit everybody that is connected to that target into their operation that they think will join into it. Now, they recruited my wife into this shit because she was working at the Multnomah County Jail kitchen. She was a food prep person at the Multnomah County Jail kitchen in 1999. She was recruited into their sting operations, and right away, I was under the belief at the time that she was cheating. I didn't know for a fact. There were tall tale signs that she was cheating, and I was under the belief that she was cheating based on her behaviors, based on the change in her behaviors, based on a change in her mannerisms. Suffice it to say, I can't prove in 1999 that she was cheating on me with somebody in law enforcement, but I had every reason to believe and suspect that was the case because of, well, tall tale signs. Let's put it this way. A spouse usually knows when their partner is cheating. And there's usually indicating signs that indicate that. And that's what was going on. So I didn't have proof or anybody telling me that she was cheating or proof that she was cheating, but I had all the tall tale signs indicating that that was the case at the time. So, law enforcement told my wife to quit her job at the Multnomah County Jail kitchen to conceal her connections with law enforcement. And the day my wife quit her job, Multnomah County Jail kitchen, is the day my wife and her whole side of the family not only were joined into a sting operation, they were celebrating the county sheriff's, the Multnomah County Sheriff and the Portland Police Department's decision in setting me up. They were celebrating that decision that day. And I witnessed their celebration. And they were even having fun, hinting to my face that something was going on that was going to fuck me over. They were implying certain things were going on that they knew I didn't know about, and they were having fun hinting at it in a very malicious manner. In other words, they're making it known to me that they were turned against me, and that they didn't care if I knew. They didn't care if I knew something was going on. They didn't care if I knew whatever it was going to fuck me over somehow, one way or another way. They didn't care. And they were making it very clear to me they didn't want me around them while they were celebrating. And this, ironically, they're on my property. Ironically, they're on my property at my apartment. They're the ones coming over to my apartment to talk with my wife. And my apartment's in my name at the time. And they're making it known to me they didn't want me around. Well, I was more than happy to walk away from these people. I was very much under the belief at this point the marriage was dead, and that they weren't really hiding the fact that everybody on my wife's side of the family were turned against me, and they weren't hiding that fact from me. They didn't care if I knew or suspected that. But anyway, as I walked away from them, I was still paying attention. My guard is up. I know shit's going on. I knew whatever it was big, based on everything that was going on at the time. I knew something. They intentionally made it known to me something big is going on, and it was going to fuck me over. They were strongly hinting to that to my face. And they were smirking while doing that. So they're not really trying to hide the fact that something's going on. So I walked away. I didn't want to be near them. I knew who wants to be surrounded by people that are intentionally making it known they're your enemies? Who wants to be around people like that? I was more than happy to walk away from them. Well, guess what? They all started talking about what they're celebrating. They all started talking about it as I walked away, thinking, I'm not paying attention. Oh, Terry's 20 feet away. He's got his back turned towards us. He's not paying attention, so we can talk about it. So they're all talking about it. And yeah, I'm like 20 feet away from them. I stepped inside my apartment. Well, my front door is still wide open. I may have my back turned towards them while I'm standing there inside my apartment, but I'm still paying attention. And I pretty much uncovered the whole damn thing. And discovered that my wife's buddies in law enforcement were going to set me up, and that my wife and everybody on her side of the family was on board with it and was going to be helping them to this effect. And they were basically celebrating, essentially. They were celebrating this. And it was easy for me to overhear it, what they were talking about and what they were saying. And it was easy to uncover this. I discovered that they were going to be taking over the surrounding apartments surrounding ours. And, my wife and her side of the family, they were in celebration mode. This is the same day my wife quit her job at the Multnomah County Jail kitchen, and she told me she quit. And she didn't give me an explanation as to why. And there was a long, awkward pause. I picked her up from work. She worked in downtown Portland, and I picked her up at the county jail. And we're driving home. I'm the one driving. She's sitting in the passenger seat next to me. And as we're driving home, she mentions to me that she quit her job. Well, I could tell that her mind was a million miles away at this moment. Her mind was completely on other things. Completely. She was literally, and it was like an afterthought on her part. It's as she was acting as though she's following somebody else's orders as an afterthought, but her mind is focused on completely on something else that these people told her about and stuff. In other words, her mind was on this sting operation she and her family joined into, and as an afterthought. And literally, she didn't say it the moment she got in the car. She said it like about 10 minutes after she got in the car. And she said it in an offhand way. She's like, by the way, I quit my job at the county jail. And then she's just like, and there was no further explanation. She's not, and I'm still driving, and I'm still waiting for her to explain, why, and she's not explaining. And there was a long, awkward, almost a minute went by where it's just a long, awkward silence, and I'm just waiting for her to elaborate. That's usually when a spouse says to you they quit their job, it usually follows with an explanation. And she was acting very strange, very unusual. She's acting like her mind was a million miles away, and it was like an afterthought kind of a thing where she just in an offhanded manner just happened to mention she quit her job. And it was obvious her mind was on other stuff, and she wasn't offering an explanation. So after almost a minute going by, I'm like, why did you quit your job, Joni? And that question threw Joni for a loop. That question threw my wife for a loop. She wasn't expecting to have to explain why. The whole time, she's following the orders of her buddies in authority. They're telling her, okay, you're going to do this, and then we're 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 going to do this. And that was what her mindset was focused on at this time. And when I asked her, why did you quit your job, Joni? When I asked her that question, it threw her for a loop because it never dawned on her to come up with an explanation as to why. In other words, she didn't have a prepared answer to give me. So she got extremely nervous and fumbled and stumbled with her words, trying to invent a plausible explanation on the fly, right then and there. And it was so blatantly obvious that that's what she was doing that I just instantly knew she's lying. She's just outright lying, and I knew it. I knew she's my wife. I know her well enough to know that she was just outright lying to me. So I'm already aware shit's going on. Now, I had every reason to believe it had something to do with an affair. That was the belief I was under. I did not. This behavior of hers gave me more than enough reason to suspect foul play. Well, after we got home, I'd say about an hour after we got home from that trip, that's when everybody on my wife's side of the family showed up for a visit on my property at my apartment. And my wife and her side of the family were celebrating. They're in good mood mode. They're in celebration mode. And they weren't hiding the fact they didn't want me near them. And they weren't hiding the fact that big shit's going on. As a matter of fact, they actually they actually said that. They actually said that. And they're implying that it was going to fuck me over. And they were doing a lot of smirking while making these hints to my face. Well, by walking away from them while they're in their celebration mode, I pretty much uncovered everything and just misjudged the size and severity of it. I discovered that my wife's buddies in authority were going to be taking over the surrounding apartments surrounding mine, and that they were going to be setting me up as a pedo, and that they had everybody on my wife's side of the family on board with this. And keep in mind that there are always tall tale signs that warn people, to let you don't have to know something's going on for a fact to know something's going on. Does that make sense? In other words, it was very obvious that at the time that shit was going on. Nobody on my wife's side of the family were acting normally. They were all behaving as though something big is going on, and that they deliberately and intentionally made it known to me something was going on, and they didn't want to specify to me anyway what it was. Well, by walking away from them and continuing to pay attention, even though I'm like 20 feet away and have my back turned towards them, that gave them the impression I'm not paying attention. So they all started talking about it. So I uncovered the fact that I was being set up. I didn't think of it at the time as a sting operation. I never knew much of anything about police operations, okay? So I didn't think of it in terms of a sting operation. I thought of it in terms of, okay, my wife's buddies in law enforcement recruited my wife into an affair and were buddies with my wife, and they turned my wife and her side of the family against me behind my back, and they all got together and decided they're going to set me up for stuff. That's how I saw it. I didn't think of it in terms of a sting operation. And I pretty well had the whole thing pegged right off the bat and just misjudged the size of it. I was under the belief that it was a few bad apples in law enforcement that recruited my wife and her side of the family into this. And I literally realized that day that sure enough, something big's going on, and I'm a target of it, and I'm going to be set up, and everybody on my wife's side of the family is on board with it, and they got the blessings of a few of their buddies in authority. Now, I uncovered all of this today she quit because of their celebration. Because of their celebration. And I realized, well, gee, I have one advantage in this situation, is that I know way fucking more than they thought I knew. So I decided to continue to act like I don't know what's going on and hang in there to prove this in self-defense. I considered just outright leaving my wife that day and immediately dismissed it. My gut instincts was telling me, hang in there, find out more, figure out what's going on first. They still think I don't know what's going on, so just, they're all putting on this bullshit act of being a loving family, and it was obviously a false pretense on their part, and they didn't give a shit. They didn't even really care if I knew it was an act on their part. So I didn't give a shit what they think. As far as I'm concerned, it became very cloak and daggerish from this point forward, because I had to literally, I made the decision I'm going to hang in there to find out more, to ascertain more as to what's going on. And the very next day, at around between 9 and 9:30 in the morning, I don't remember what time it was, but it was quite early. It was like 9:30 a.m. It could have been 8:30 a.m., but I wasn't keeping track of events based on specific time at the time. Okay, but it was quite early. It was around, I would say, between 9 and 9:30 in the morning. I woke up, started a pot of coffee, and then I went outside and looked over at we lived in a duplex, so we had a next door neighbor that lived in the same building that we lived in. It was a duplex, and after I started the pot of coffee, I went outside and looked over at the next door neighbor's door, expecting to see a 72-hour notice, because this is what my wife and her side of the family were celebrating the day before. And sure enough, at around 9:30 in the morning, there was a 72-hour notice on our next door neighbor's door that was not there the day before. So that 72-hour notice was put on our next door neighbor's door the day after my wife quit her job at the Multnomah County Jail Kitchen, and it was put on the next door neighbor's door very early in the morning. So I immediately knew this is the reason why my wife quit her job at the County Jail Kitchen, and this is the reason why she was being secretive and lying to me about the reasons why she quit, and this is what my wife and her side of the family was celebrating. They're going to be taking over the surrounding apartments surrounding mine and setting me up. And I knew the same day they told my wife to quit her job, the county sheriff told my wife to quit her job, is the same day the county sheriff filled out the paperwork to get the 72-hour notice to take over the next door neighbor's apartment. Now, this is how I uncovered the beginning stages of a Portland Police, Multnomah County Sheriff sting operation. I'm sure that's what they refer to it as. I refer to it as a bunch of organized pedophiles and a bunch of organized serial killers and a bunch of organized murderers that have jobs carrying badges that are organized to frame people. That's how I refer to it, since that's what they really are. So, to make a very, very long story short, that my wife quit her job in 1999 at the County Jail Kitchen. 1999. Early 1999. And after the county sheriffs and the Portland police took over surrounding apartments surrounding mine, they paid my wife and her side of the family to turn my yard into a playground. with well over $1,000 worth of kid stuff, equipment, using mystery money of which my wife and her sister did not want to admit where they were getting money for this shit. They bought multiple very large pools costing well over $300. Now, keep in mind, this is 1999. A $300 swimming pool in 1999 would probably cost like $450 in 2014. So these are quite very large swimming pools. Very expensive, too, considering I was unemployed at the time. My wife just quit her job at the Multnomah County Jail Kitchen, and she was working someplace else for minimum wage. She immediately got a job someplace else and was working minimum wage. In other words, we were lucky to pay the rent at that time. Based on the amount of money we had coming in, we were lucky to pay the rent and the utilities and to buy food. And both me and my wife back then were smokers, so we had to buy cigarettes. And by the time we paid for that, all that stuff, guess what? We're broke. Now, my wife and her side of the family were being coached and directed by the Multnomah County Sheriffs and by the Portland Police to turn my yard. We lived in a duplex. That means it's one building and there's 2 apartments in that building. And we had a pretty good sized yard, and for a duplex, we had a very decent sized yard. And the county sheriffs and Portland Police was literally paying my wife and her sister to turn my yard into a playground. They bought multiple large pools, each costing around $300 to $350 each, and they bought 2 within a 30-day period. So they had 2 very large swimming pools in our yard. The 2 of those pools cost around $600 to $700 alone, right there. And I even asked them where'd they get the money for this, and they both just grinned and smirked and just they were being very sheepish about it, and they're smirking while doing it, and they just pretend. My wife just pretended she's borrowing the money from her sister, and her sister was making up bullshit excuses as to why she's loaning the money to my wife. And I knew she was lying because they were way too sheepish about it. And like I said, I already knew their F buddies in law enforcement were right next door, and knew they're being coached and directed. And after they put those 2 pools on my yard, they bought a very large and expensive trampoline for the yard as well. And that also cost like $300 to $350. Now I have to take their word, because they're telling me what they spent. Each and every time they bought a pool, I'm like, how much did this cost? I'm upset. I'm acting like I'm upset. I already know why they're buying the pool, okay? I already knew they were setting me up. But I had to act like I don't fucking know. I made a decision. I was going to hang in there to prove this. I immediately considered leaving my wife, but I knew if I leave, they're still going to set me up. So whether I stay or whether I leave, they're going to set me up. I knew if I stayed, I can prove they're setting me up. If I leave, then I won't be able to prove a damn thing. So I was hanging in there to prove this and keeping track of the whole damn thing while they set me up. They bought a very large, expensive trampoline. They said it cost like $350. And right after they bought that trampoline, the county sheriffs and the Portland Police told my wife to talk to our kids. And my wife was recruiting our kids into this. And county sheriffs and the Portland police arranged to have a whole bunch of kids in our yard to come over and visit and to hang out with our kids. And my wife was telling our kids that a bunch of kids are going to be coming over, and she was telling our daughters to act like they're their friends. And the county sheriffs had a whole bunch of kids. In other words, kids that are related to people in law enforcement, kids that are related to people that are friends with people in law enforcement, and kids of people that are girlfriends to people in law enforcement. In other words, people that law enforcement regularly use in sting operations. They recruit their kids into this shit. And they had a whole bunch of kids come over our yard wanting to use the pool and wanting to use the trampoline and shit. And they were pretending to be our daughter's friends. And I knew right away that they were not our daughter's friends. But they claimed they were, and I even asked my daughters, I said, are these kids your friends? And my daughters looked me in the face and lied to me and told me that they were. And I knew that was a lie. And these kids literally took over our yard. And our kids were out there in the yard with them, but our kids, like I said, they were being told and coached and instructed by my wife to cooperate with these kids. Now, these kids were helping law enforcement to set me up. And my wife was telling our kids to just pretend that these are their friends. Ironically, these kids were so busy performing for the county sheriff's video surveillance while they were on our yard that they weren't even paying attention to our kids. And our kids were just out there in the yard standing there and watching them. Because our kids didn't even know these kids. And these kids were literally ordering around our kids as though our kids worked for them. Now this is how obvious it was. And right after this, the Multnomah County Sheriffs arranged to get a look-alike of me onto my property. And when they started using this double on my property, this was during when they started using this double on my property. This is when my mother was being poisoned by the Multnomah County Sheriffs and by the Portland Police and by my wife. And at the same time, on the other side of town, my father, his name is Don Wager, he was being gang stalked by multiple plainclothes people in law enforcement that were constantly staging street theater tactics around him as a way of harassing him and as a way of terrorizing him. And they were trying to provoke him into either acting in self-defense. It's hard to explain. It's like being surrounded by a gang of people that have an agenda and they're constantly performing for video surveillance. So they try to portray the person they're targeting as a bad guy while they harass their targets and terrorize their targets. It's difficult to explain. It's like how do you explain it? Everybody's familiar with a prostitution sting or a drug bust sting. Everybody's familiar with that. Everybody knows that in a prostitution sting, law enforcement will take over an entire motel for their operations. They fill that motel with their operatives, with undercover law officers, and with civilian operatives. And law enforcement uses female officers and female civilian operatives to act like prostitutes, and they perform for video surveillance while they engage people in conversation on the streets and on the sidewalks and in parking lots so that they could frame and entrap people as Johns. And it's sort of the same thing in a drug bust situation. Law enforcement will take over literally an entire apartment complex. Literally an entire apartment complex and fill it with their police operatives, undercover police operatives, and with their civilian operatives. And they will pretend, they'll dress up like drug dealers, and they'll literally act like drug dealers. They'll literally act like they're drug dealers for the purpose of video surveillance. In other words, they're performing like actors. They perform for video surveillance. They're not making a movie for Hollywood. They perform for video surveillance to make people look like, to make the people that they're talking with appear guilty by association. Now that's framing. That's entrapment. You could be completely innocent and do nothing wrong, and just walking down the sidewalk trying to go home or trying to go grocery shopping or something, and you can be approached by these people that have control of the entire surrounding area for their operation, and they'll deliberately engage you in conversation, and they have trained techniques and trained tactics. In other words, they know exactly what to say and exactly how to behave to make you look like a bad guy. In other words, you don't have to do anything wrong. By their sheer performance alone, they can make you appear guilty by association, just because you're near them. Well, that's what it's like to be targeted by a sting operation. Well, on my own property, I'm surrounded by fucking sting operatives that were constantly 24/7 were performing for video surveillance, and they were using a double of me, a dude that was acting as a lookalike of me. His hair was cut the same length as mine. He had a mustache just like mine. He was dressing just like me, and he's on my fucking property. And he was trying to hide the fact that he was going into the apartment next door where the county sheriffs were renting the apartment next door to us. He was trying to hide that the whole fucking time. He didn't want me to notice that he's pals with these people next door. These sting operatives were staging all kinds of crimes after they got the stubble on my property. They were sabotaging our daughter's bicycles. They even were stealing some of our daughter's bicycles. They were sabotaging our vehicle. They were even staging car fire. They even staged a full-blown car fire that was like 30 feet away from my apartment, of which I had to deal with. I had to deal with that. A full car on fire. I mean, it wasn't just the motor on fire. The whole freaking car was on fire. From the front bumper to the rear bumper. The whole freaking car was on fire. And those sting operatives staged that car fire because they were right fucking next door, and they didn't come out of that apartment to help with this, putting out this fire. This was all for their fucking video surveillance shit. So while they were keeping me busy with all kinds of almost daily disasters, on the other side of town, multiple plainclothes sting operatives were gang stalking and harassing and terrorizing my father. And they were constantly performing street theater tactics around him as a way of terrorizing and harassing him. And they were even trying to provoke him into taking action against them. And my father explained this to me. He explained what happened. He told me what they did and everything. Now, I already knew I was surrounded by a bunch of people in law enforcement, of which my wife and her side of the family were palling around with and were helping to set me up. I already knew this. So when I found out from my father what they were doing to him, that's when I realized, Jesus fucking Christ, this is much larger Much larger than what I initially thought it was. Initially, I thought it was just everybody on my wife's side of the family and a couple of bad apples in law enforcement that were palling around with / sleeping around with my wife. When I found out what they did to my father, that's when I realized that there's way too many people in law enforcement involved for this to be a case of a few bad apples in law enforcement. It was a full-blown, flat-out police operation where the Portland Police and the Multnomah County Sheriffs were working openly together to set me up, and they were not just targeting me, they were targeting my parents at the same time. I 2 weeks after I kicked this double that the county sheriffs were using on my property, 2 weeks after I kicked that double off my property, 2 weeks after I kicked this double off my property, that double battered my mother. She was living in her motorhome in a mobile trailer park. This double battered my mother, and my mother didn't know what to do. She's disabled. She was on SSI. She lives alone. And she didn't know what to do. She called me, asked if I'd come pick her up. And I didn't know. She just moved to this trailer park. And I didn't know where to find it. It was on the other side of town. I'd never been there before, so it's like I had to take the bus to get there because she wanted me to bring her and her motor home to my place. And I didn't have our car because my wife had our car, so I had to take the bus there, and I didn't even know where it was. It took me about 2-3 hours to find the place. And when I got there, 2 Portland police officers and this double that I kicked off my property was waiting in ambush for me. And they told me that I have to leave that motorhome there because the lease for the property that the motorhome was sitting on was in the name of this double. So I had to leave it there for him. And the whole time, this double and the 2 Portland police officers were smirking, and they didn't give a rat's ass. This man battered my mother, who's disabled and on SSI. So I took my mother home, minus her motorhome. I had to abandon that motorhome to this sting operation, to this fucking double that they're using on my property to set me up. A month later, my mother was staying with me on my property. My father still lived alone in his own apartment on the other side of town. And about a month after my mother was battered by this double, my mother and father became poisoned. And they became poisoned at the same time. They're both are living on the other side of town from each other. And they both were poisoned at the same time. My wife poisoned my mother. And at the same damn time, the sting operatives that were harassing and terrorizing and gang stalking my father poisoned him. My mother called 911. My mother ran out of my apartment and went to a payphone to call 911 because my wife literally admitted to my mother's face that she poisoned her. They're getting out. The police did not act on my mother's 911 call. The police did not question anybody on my mother's 911 call. In effect, my mother's 911 call was covered up by the Portland Police and Multnomah County Sheriffs. 3 weeks later, I found out that my father was also poisoned. My father never owned a phone in his life. He never uses phones. He's never had a phone in his name in his fucking life. He's old-fashioned. He's born in 1933. He hated phones. So he had no way to contact me. At no time did he ever ask me for my phone number, and I never offered to give it to him. And the reason why is because I always knew he hated phones. I knew as a child growing up, I knew my father hated phones. I knew that all my life. Well, he had no way to contact me by phone when they poisoned him. And he was too ill to come over immediately to tell me what happened. So it took him 3 weeks. And the day he left his apartment to take the bus to come over to where I live is the day law enforcement told my wife to take me out of the apartment for the day. Everybody, keep in mind, everybody's trying to hide the fact from me that my mother was poisoned, and they're trying to hide the fact from me that my wife poisoned her. I was being lied to and misled as to what the hell was going on at that point. And I missed my father. I wasn't at my apartment when he came over to visit to tell me what happened to him. And so he was heading back to his apartment, and he's waiting at a bus stop. And I noticed I was driving I went to the bicycle store to buy new inner tubes for our daughter's bicycles, because our daughter's bicycles were constantly being sabotaged by sting operatives, because they were constantly keeping me busy with disasters. And I noticed my father sitting at the bus stop. So I pulled over. We then talked to my father at the bus stop, and he told me what they did to him. He told me they poisoned him. And he was in a state of shock. He looked like shit. I was in a state of shock because of the sheer amount of people that were involved. They were not even trying to hide it. The same fucking day, my father is trying to come to my apartment to tell me that multiple people in law enforcement poisoned him, is the same fucking day I had to go to the fucking store to buy new inner tubes for our daughter's bicycles because my wife's fuck buddies in law enforcement were sabotaging our daughter's bicycles. My father feared for my safety. My father feared for our daughter's safety. He knew this was big. He didn't know what they were doing to me. I never got around to telling him or my mother what they were doing to me, because I knew already I was under illegal video surveillance and surrounded by my wife's fuck buddies in law enforcement. And I was hanging in there documenting their communications. Every time my wife and her sister went shopping together, I knew damn well they're meeting with my wife's fuck buddies in law enforcement. And I took the time to document their communications every time they used that code word, they're going shopping together. In other words, every time they did that, I knew damn well they're meeting with county sheriffs and Portland police. And I made damn sure I had audio recorders in my wife's car every fucking time they left to go grocery shopping. Every time they claimed to go shopping together. So I was documenting their goddamn communications back then. I knew damn well I was catching their asses. Three days after my father warned me about what they did to him, he was dead. He died. And it was a Multnomah County Sheriff officer that came to my door, Multnomah County Sheriff detective that came to my door to tell me he died. I collapsed on my front porch when I heard this because I severely misjudged the size and severity of this operation of the Portland Police and Multnomah County Sheriffs. I had this whole thing pegged right from the beginning and just misjudged how large and how severe and to what degree these people were prepared to go. I was under the belief the whole time that it was just a few bad apples in law enforcement helping my wife and her family to set me up. I had no clue that other people in my family were also being targeted at the same time and that their lives were in fucking danger from these people. That county sheriff even admitted to my face that they removed the poisons they used to murder him with from my father's apartment right after he was murdered. And for the next 5 days, I got daily phone threats from multiple people in law enforcement that were lying about who they were, and they were making threats and demands for 5 days straight, immediately following the death of my father. An hour after I got the very last threatening phone call from these people in law enforcement, I caught my wife Joan Wager and her sister Vicky Rosales planning porn and life-size Barbie dolls in my home. And this was just an hour after I got the very last threatening call. Two days later, I discovered that green-jacketed female county sheriff officers were passing cards through our oldest daughter's bedroom window to our daughter that had printed paragraphs on them, and that our daughter was copying the contents of those cards into her diary as though they are her own words. Our daughter had a very big goofy grin on her face while she was copying these cards into her diary. And when I confiscated her diary, took it from her and read it, I found out she's not even writing down any actual events that are occurring at the time in her diary. All she was doing with that diary was calling me a pedo in it. That's it. She was making up a whole bunch of made-up stories, constantly calling me a pedo. This is after they had a double on my property. This is after I kicked that double off our property. That double battered my mother. My mother lost her motorhome to this situation. My mother and father were poisoned by these people. There's no mention of any of these actual events in our daughter's diary. All she had in that diary was made-up stories that were printed on cards by the county sheriffs, and county sheriffs were passing them to her through her window. And she was copying those cards into her diary. 2 months later, I was formally charged on 44 bullshit made out of thin air felony charges, pedo type charges, that turned to 0 10 days later. And this was the Multnomah County Sheriff's and the Portland Police Department's way of backing up their blackmail, because they were making threats and demands ever since they murdered my father. They weren't hiding. Nobody that was involved in this were hiding their guilt after they murdered my father. Everybody involved was flaunting it and making it intentionally known. The whole time they thought I didn't know beforehand. Well, they were intentionally making everything pretty much known after my father was murdered by them. They wanted me to know my wife and her sister right after they murdered my father. They wanted me to know my wife and her sister were helping them by turning my yard into a playground and filling my home with paraphernalia. And they wanted me to know our oldest daughter was working for them and was being coached and directed by them to write a diary. And it was the county sheriffs that were directing every fucking thing she wrote in it. They wanted me to know. Well, I continued. I continued the same tactic I used ever since I uncovered this conspiracy of theirs the day my wife quit her job at County Jail Kitchen. I continued to act like I don't know what's going on. And I literally shut the fuck up. When I realized that this was much larger than what I initially thought it was, and that they're killing people, and that they literally have my whole family surrounded by these people, I shut the fuck up in fear that somebody else would be killed or seriously harmed. I'm literally being blackmailed. They're making it known. They just demonstrated how they poison people. They cover up 911. They batter my mother. They poisoned my parents. They covered up my mother's 911 call, and then they murdered my father right after he warned me as to who did it to him. They just demonstrated that. And then they're blackmailing me from this point forward. They've just made it known. My whole family is surrounded by these fucking people, and they're killing people. And they made it known that 911 calls are summarily covered up by these son of a bitches. Well, I acted like I didn't know what the fuck's going on. My father feared for my daughter's safety. I feared for my daughter's safety. I already knew my oldest daughter was already recruited into this. She was a teenager at the time. She was like 14, 15, something like that at the time. And county sheriff, she was literally at the age of 14, 15, she's working for the Multnomah County Sheriff as a fucking sting operative. So guess what? Your law enforcement recruits children into their sting operations. Now, is that enough to charge them with corrupting a minor, isn't it? What the hell do you think they're guilty of? Sting operation, my ass. They're a bunch of organized murderers and serial killers and pedos, and they commit the crimes. They surround their target. They take control of their target surrounding area. They bring in their operatives. They stage crimes, and they use doubles and photogenic photos, and they use doubles and video surveillance to frame people. They commit the crimes themselves. They recruit people that are close to their target and turn those people against their target so that they have them to lie for their asses. And then they just spend several months staging shit so that they can give their target the blame. And that's what they were doing the whole fucking time. Now that's just 1999. Those 44 felony charges were dropped 10 days later. No explanation by the Portland police and no explanation from the prosecutor. None. They used the 44 felony charges as an excuse to pedify me. All over TV, all over the newspapers, all over my fucking neighborhood so nobody would care if I murdered. Because this is how the Portland police and the Multnomah County pedo sheriff kill people all the fucking time this way. They have a name for it. They call it pedifying. Now, I'm sending this news tip. Now, I've sent thousands, hundreds, thousands of fucking tips to the goddamn worthless FBI bastards, the gutless fuck wonders of the U.S. Go direct your brats some more in your sting operations, law enforcement. Go direct your brats. Everybody that is a relative or a friend or a girlfriend of people in law enforcement is a sting operative. Every single fucking one of them. They all fucking lie for one another. They gang up on their targets like a fucking, they're like, God. I can't use words that are strong enough to express my disgust. Now I am sending this stupid tip and providing a shit ton of information. I'm going to go slow and just scroll down so that this recording catches it. And I am providing links to evidence. And there's a lot of links. I've provided a great deal of video evidence along with actual events, information of actual events. I've provided links to videos backing up my complaints. I've provided links to written documents backing up my complaints. I have provided hospital documents proving cover-up of poisonings. I have provided audio recording of death threats that law enforcement was putting in my home, where they brag to their crimes. They brag I can't get help from 911, and that they brag that they pedophied me and stuff like this. I provided links to the county sheriffs, taking screenshots of the county sheriff sending me emails where they're taunting me. They're flaunting this fact. I've sent evidence that the Portland Police and Multnomah County Sheriffs were renting apartments surrounding mine, and that they plant cars in the parking lot right in front of my apartment with the license plate "C'est la Vu" on it. And that's around the time I was getting their audio death threats put in my home. They were breaking in my home when I wasn't in my home, and they were placing death threats in my home. Now I'm providing links to a lot of evidence backing up my complaints. I know this is being recorded, so anybody can pause their video anytime if they want to read this. And as soon as I get there. Now I've gone through the whole thing. Now I don't think this is going to go through, and the reason why is because I can only have 3,000 characters in this. So I don't think this is going to go through. I can try shortening it. I don't see how I can shorten it. See, how can you send crime tips to the fascist FBI when they limit people to only 3,000 characters? How can I explain a murderous sting operation where that takes place over a long period of time, where there's a consecutive, continuous acts of crimes that are being committed continuously and ongoing? How do you explain that such crimes with only 3,000 characters? Now, how am I supposed to send it? I guess I can take my name off right here. I've already... Yeah, I know. Oh, wow. It just edited everything. Oh, man. So that's all they're going to let me send. They just literally halved everything that I'm trying to send. Oh, man. Okay, I'll try this. I'll just abbreviate it. Let me go scroll. Bear with me here. I'm going to give them a link to my blog site where I have everything that I want to send to them, which I can't because they limit me to 3,000 characters. So I'll just send them a link to my blog where I have everything already posted. Right there. Okay, this is my blog right here. I'm going to copy the link at my blog site. Get rid of all this. Now, there. This is a link to multiple. This is a link to multiple links to actual crimes committed by police, sheriffs, sting operatives, and by their civilian operatives. Okay, now I'll just provide a link, and let me put my name here because I do not hide who the hell I am. And once again, this is the link that I'm sending them to. This is my blog, and this is everything that I was trying to send to them, but I can't because they only accept 3,000 characters or less on their tip page. So this is what I'm directing them to right here. Everything that's in blue, these are links to evidence. So this is the web page I'm directing them to, and since I can't just copy and paste all this and send it to their tip line directly. So I have to post my complaint on my blog with links to evidence, and then submit it to the FBI tip website. Now let me go back up here real quick just to show I'm still on their website. And now zip, like I said, 97233. Now I'm not posting my address on here, because I'm not going to post that on. I'm not going to post my address or my phone number or anything like that on here, because first off, it's the FBI. They know how to find me. They know I live right here in Portland, Oregon. They know I'm in Southeast Portland. Jesus fucking Christ, you can't fart in Portland, Oregon without the fucking FBI knowing about it. They know who the hell I am. I'm identifying who the hell I am. That's good enough. I'm acknowledging I live in Portland, Oregon. As far as my specific address, I'm not going to post that, because I don't need the whole goddamn world to know exactly where I fucking live. But I know damn well the FBI knows where I live, and I sure as hell don't fear their asses. And now I'm going to send this damn tip, and I'm going to post this damn video on my blog to prove I report crimes to you bastards. This is no different than me making a 911 call and complaining. I am complaining. Okay, now I gotta type what? Okay. People that can't see very well, I can't even read that. Okay, I can read that. 115. Okay, now submit. It's working. It's working. Computer, 1.3 gigahertz processor. Very laptop computer. Very crappy, slow laptop computer.
Because my computer's slow. I have a decent internet speed problem. I have a Wi-Fi cable internet, so I have decent internet speed. It's just my computer. My computer is extremely slow. Okay, the FBI Special Bureau of blah 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 crap shit. Go direct your brat some more. Pretend you're law enforcement while you all direct your brats and your doubles to perform for video surveillance. Call that law enforcement, huh? Well, anyway, I just proved on video right there. These crimes are being reported. Now, explain what happened to my mother's 911 call, because my father was murdered after that. What happened to my mother's 911 call, FBI? Gee, FBI, you're the ones that run and regulate 911. That's a federal program. So what happened to my mother's 911 call? And why the fuck did you have a double on my property? And why did that double get to keep my mother's motorhome? 44 felony charges that turned to 0 10 days later with no explanation. The fucking Portland police and the Multnomah County sheriffs and the Portland FBI and the Oregon State Police are a bunch of organized pedophiles. They're a bunch of organized serial killers, and they're womanizers, and they recruit women that they womanize with into sting operations, and they teach these women how to frame people and how to perform for video surveillance, and they teach these women to recruit their children into sting operations to perform for law enforcement's video surveillance. Does that sound like law enforcement to you? It sounds like a pedo ring to me.
Jesus fucking Christ! Bunch of organized goddamn pieces of shit. Charge these fuckers with a crime. Publicly charge them with a crime and they fucking ignore it. Anybody in law enforcement that refuses to take a formal complaint is an accessory to the crime. FBI. Now what happened to my mother's 911 call? Murders took place after that. FBI. Now what happened to my mother's 911 call back then, huh? I remind you, I was documenting my wife and her sister's communications with their fuck buddies in law enforcement every time they went shopping together. That was code for them to meet with their buddies in authority. And I knew it the whole fucking time in 1999. It's amazing where you can hide an audio recorder in a fucking car. It's amazing the conversations I can catch my wife and her sister having with their fuck buddies in law enforcement. Now admit to your investigation. Oh, wait a minute. That's right. They already did. They charged me on 44 bullshit made out of thin air felony charges that disappeared 10 days later. So they did admit. Now, should I force a trial? You all have a lot to answer for.